All right, good evening. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Before we call roll, I'd like to read a note from Commissioner Mike Wolkin, who stated, "Dear Commissioners Francis, Hopkins, Jorgensen, Munoz Morris, Vice Chair Khan, and Chair Quincy, with regret, I've decided to step down from the commission for personal reasons. I have really enjoyed serving on the commission and working with you all, and I will miss you all. I wish you all well as you continue to perform a valuable public service. I also want to publicly thank staff members and department heads of the Community Development Department, the City Clerk's Office, and the City Attorney's Office for all their outstanding support over the years. I will miss you all too. All the best, Mike Wolkin." So I know I probably speak for other commissioners, but we're really going to miss Mike. I thought his contributions were always thoughtful and made our decisions better, and certainly our commission better. So I don't know if anybody else had any comments, but we're very much going to miss him. Okay, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Deputy City Clerk, will you please call roll?
Commissioner Francis?
Here.
Commissioner Hopkins? Commissioner Hopkins will be absent tonight. Commissioner Jorgensen?
Here.
Commissioner Munoz Morris?
Here.
Vice Chair Khan?
Here.
Chair Quincy?
Here. So at this time, we'll hear any public comment for items not on tonight's agenda. Items raised are generally referred to staff, and if action by the commission is necessary, may be scheduled for a future meeting. Deputy City Clerk, do we have any public comment?
No, Chair, we do not.
Okay, next is our consent agenda. Does anyone have comments on the minutes? Seeing none, do you have a motion and a second to approve?
I move to approve the minutes from June 8th.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. So next, we'll move on to the public hearing portion of our meeting. Any court challenge to the action taken on public hearing items on this agenda may be limited to considering only those items raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the City of San Luis Obispo at or prior to the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please give your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. So the public hearing item before us is to review amendments to Title 17 zoning regulations associated with allowable incentives for development standards with the provision of new all-electric buildings. Would Sustainability Manager Chris Reed present the report?
All right, thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Chris Reed, Sustainability Manager. Tonight we'll be discussing proposed Title 17 amendments in support of the Clean Energy Program for new buildings. Staff's recommendation tonight is to adopt the attached Planning Commission resolution, recommending that the City Council introduce and adopt an ordinance amending Title 17 of the Municipal Code regarding temporary incentives for development standards with the provision of new all-electric buildings with a sunset date of December 31st, 2025, and an amendment to the current definition of all-electric buildings. Tonight we'll provide an ordinance background, an overview of community outreach conducted to date, discuss what the current municipal code says as it relates to all-electric new buildings, and then provide an overview of the proposed amendments. So staff at the June 8th meeting provided an extensive overview on the history of the Clean Energy Choice Program, the information presented to council at their study session in February, and the strategic direction staff has received to come forward with the Clean Energy Program for new buildings. Staff will be coming to council on July 5th at a public hearing for that policy decision. In short, the proposed approach is to require that new buildings be all electric via a new Title 8 chapter, and Title 8's in health and safety. That policy will focus exclusively on new buildings and be supported by resilience considerations, ongoing outreach, reasonable exemptions, and a number of incentives. And the incentives that are relevant to tonight's public hearing have to do with potential regulatory flexibility. In support of that policy update, since last December, staff has conducted an intensive and extensive community outreach effort. We have reached out and invited every builder and developer we know to be working or has recently worked in the community to have one-on-one conversations. We've met with many of them. We met directly with non-residential, market rate housing and affordable housing developers. We met with a number of community and trade organizations, including HBA, including Chamber of Commerce, Climate Coalition, et cetera. And we learned a tremendous amount through all those conversations that informed the entirety of the policy. But specific to tonight's discussion, we heard a collective and ongoing interest in retaining the regulatory flexibility as it currently exists and slightly expanding it. So those are the two primary things we'll be talking about, as well as some definition cleanup. So to start with the incentives piece, so in 1770-95 of the current municipal code, we already have the incentives related to all-electric new buildings. And this was adopted in 2020 concurrent with the existing all-electric building policy. We see here that site development standards such as height measurements, lot coverage, setbacks, et cetera, may be exceeded to the minimum extent deemed necessary to allow for equipment installations or similar improvements to accommodate all-electric buildings. But importantly, this request is narrowly constrained both in contents and time. So for this exception to be granted, it requires a director's action. The request must be minor in nature and not have the potential to cause a significant effect on the environment, and it's subject to the director action provisions in section 17-10840. As far as the time constraint goes, that regulatory flexibility is codified and set to expire December 31st of 2022. So in addition to a request to continue this on into the future, in speaking with developers and builders, there's also an interest in possibly adding parking provisions parking standards as one of the areas where there could be some minor flexibility to allow for the installation of electrical infrastructure and mechanical equipment. So the recommended ordinance amendments in staff's recommendation are two things. So one is to retain this flexibility through December 31st, 2025. So this would provide another 3-year bridge. So as folks maybe have a project that was substantively designed or possibly even entitled but isn't exempt from the program in other ways, gives them some flexibility to be successful in their all-electric design. We anticipate this happening very rarely, but in those cases where it's necessary, it's there. And 2, adding parking standards as a category that'd be eligible for that flexibility. The other area where all-electric buildings and Title 17 intersect is in the general definition. So in 2020, we also added a definition for what an all-electric building is. The second sentence here is basically an exemption for certain types of commercial kitchen equipment that was included in the definition of what an all-electric building is. It made sense in the context of the 2022 policy adoption and how we developed it, which was as part of our local amendments to the California Energy Code. But now that we're adopting it in Title 8 outside of that, it doesn't make sense to include that exemption in the definition anymore. And in fact, it creates a situation where you have exemptions in Title 8 and then you have an exemption in Title 17. It's just very clumsy. So the idea here is it's more elegant to strike that piece out of that definition and then have those exemptions all live in one place. So taken together, there's 3 proposed substantive amendments. So the first is extending the term for 3 more years. The second is adding parking standards as a category for regulatory flexibility. And then the third is striking the commercial kitchen portion of the definition. With that, I'll leave staff's recommendation on the screen and open to conversation or questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? It looks like we do. Commissioner Francis.
Hi, yes, I remember at the last meeting, you discussed some of the scenarios where that regulatory flexibility would have been necessary with, height standards on top of roofs and things like that. Can you describe a potential scenario where that flexibility might be necessary with parking?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. One example where this might apply is there's a infill project number of residential units. It possibly had substantial design completed or underway, possibly even entitled, but maybe not exempt for various reasons. And they need to, and perhaps they're in a floodplain, so they can't underground the additional electrical transformer, and maybe they have 11 parking spot requirements. And in order to site that last electrical transformer above ground, they need to remove 1 parking spot. So that's an example where this would apply.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Commissioner Munoz Morris.
Thank you, Chair. I hesitate to ask this because I think it's kind of covered, but I was thinking along the same lines. So the parking flexibility is essentially to allow an instance such as that where they need to claim a spot for a transformer, et cetera, right?
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Not seeing any more questions. Do we have any more questions? Okay, seeing none. Do we have any public comment on this item?
No, Chair, we do not.
All right, bring it back to the commission for deliberations. Do we have a motion and a second to start with?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution as drafted by city staff.
I'll second that motion.
And do we have any deliberation?
No deliberation for me. I guess, just want to state that I'm supportive of this, but part of me is a little sad just because as somebody who enjoys cooking, there's something about cooking with fire, and I'll miss that. But I completely understand why we're moving in this direction. So, yeah, that's it.
Not seeing any other comments. So we have a motion and a second. Deputy City Clerk, can you call roll?
Commissioner Munoz Morris,
Yes.
Commissioner Francis,
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Khan,
Yes.
Chair Quincy,
Yes.
and that motion passes.
All right. Well, that was our only public hearing item tonight. Does Deputy, sorry, I'm messing up your title here. Deputy Community Development Director Tyler Corey. Can you give us an update?
Sure, thanks Chair Quincy. The kind of forecast looking out into July, our next meeting is for July 13th. Currently, we do have 3 items scheduled for that hearing. We have the safe parking at the Railroad Square. I've talked about that in the past. We also have a parking reduction request, a 50% parking reduction request. This is for the current cafe at 1531 Monterey. They're looking to change the use to a restaurant, and so they're looking for some parking flexibility to do that. And then finally, we have the Avila Ranch Phase 5. It's the R1 product, 101 units in that phase, and so looking at different designs for that component of the project. So that's looking like what's going to be happening on the 13th, and then looking out on July 27th. Currently, I don't have any items for that hearing, so that might be one where we may need to cancel, but I'll know more as we get to the next hearing.
Great. This might have been the shortest meeting we've ever had. So the next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is scheduled on July 13th, 2022 at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers. So our meeting is adjourned.